Jesus, son of Mary. It says, is this not the carpenter, Jesus, son of Mary? And then are not his brothers here? And then the brothers are named, James, Joseph, Simon, and Jude. And his sisters, who aren't named, but we think later Salome might be one. She's named at the burial and so forth. So that's where I began with our earliest record. And as you go through the Gospel of Mark, guess what? There is no Joseph. There's no Joseph.
Right.
He doesn't exist. Now, I would not conclude from that there wasn't a Joseph. I think there was a Joseph. But clearly Mark has no tradition about Joseph being the father or even a virgin birth story. Now, when Matthew rewrites Mark, which he does, Mark has 16 chapters, and it's all 98% of it is in Matthew, and then he adds all of his things too. But as he goes, he edits, and he says, is this not Jesus, son of Joseph? What an amazing edit. You know, his source said, is this not Jesus, son of Mary? And when you call a Jewish male the son of the mother, you're basically saying the father's unknown. There's a word in Hebrew that people misunderstand. It's mamzer, M-A-M-Z-E-R. And if you look it up, people say, well, that means bastard. It does not mean bastard. It means someone's whose birth is somehow irregular, or not just the normal mom, dad, had the kid, simple story. Something else happened. So I began there. That's our earliest source. And I would then go on a kind of sleuthing mission and say, if Joseph isn't the father of Jesus. Now here it's really interesting because my evangelical Christian students would also now agree with me. They go, yeah, Dr. Tabor, Joseph's not the father. Oh, interesting. And there was no father. So you see, in a funny way, I'm agreeing with the believing Christians and saying, nope, Joseph's not the father. But then I'm saying, so who would be the father?
Right.
Do we have a clue? Do we have a name? Do we have anything to go on? Okay. Now, when you read the virgin birth accounts, they're called virgin birth accounts. I'm going to mute my phone. I didn't think to do that. They're called virgin birth accounts. They're actually virgin conception accounts. That's more accurate. Matthew is really interesting, and he's the earliest after Mark, because what he says is Joseph was engaged to Mary. Now remember, in this time, a woman might get engaged at, say, 14. Some people say 12, but let's go with 14. And it doesn't mean they're dating and going out, to drive-in movies or something, if you know what I mean.
Right.
It means parents have arranged for the future, began to put together the legalities for this marriage to take place. It might not take place when they're 14. It might be 16 or whatever. We don't know how old the betrothed is, Joseph. But we're told he's a good man, and he's a righteous man. And he finds out that his beloved spouse is pregnant. That's how Matthew presents it. Now, Matthew, of course, says she's pregnant by the Holy Spirit. But the phrase by the Holy Spirit does not necessarily mean in Greek the Holy Spirit impregnated her.
Interesting.
It means through the agency of the Holy Spirit. Now, I don't think Matthew thought that there was another man involved. So I'm not trying to say that. But I'm saying in our second earliest account, if you take them chronologically, first account, Mark, he's not even mentioned ever. And Jesus is called son of Mary. Second account, Matthew, Joseph's like, oh, I'm engaged to this woman, but she's pregnant. That's not my baby. Okay. If you just stop there on the human, not the theological, we've got a unwed mother, not yet married. Now, before we condemn her, notice what Matthew does. He starts with the genealogy. You saw this in the book, the Jesus Dynasty. And he lists all of the men going from Abraham down to Joseph. So he's tracing Joseph's genealogy, and then he's going to tell you Joseph's not the father, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because that would, like, why are you tracing his genealogy?
Exactly.
But did you notice that he mentions 3 women in the genealogy? And you never mention women in a Jewish genealogy. The women are understood to be the mothers of the next child, whoever it is. Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac
Right.
begot Jacob. You don't mention the women. And Jacob had 2 wives and 2 handmaidens, or sometimes called concubines, kind of surrogate wives. And you don't tell all the tribes of Jacob who the mothers were. You just don't do that. You say.
Right.
So think about that. He mentions 4 women. What do those 4 women have in common? They're all in the line of David, just like Jesus or Joseph. And they all have some sexual irregularity associated with them. First one, Rahab the harlot. Rahab the harlot? Yes, is listed. Ruth, the Moabite woman. Which Moabites are known for being very promiscuous and so on. Not saying she was, but in the story in the book of Ruth, she crawls up under the covers of Boaz, gets him drunk, and when he wakes up, he goes, "Oh, I guess we're together." Kind of, like, doesn't explain what happened. But it does say she uncovered his feet. And in Hebrew, feet is a euphemism for your sexual part of your body. So it's just so you say, well, that wasn't fornication. I mean, they were both eligible to marry. She was a widow, as I recall. And then it mentions Bathsheba, who's, the wife, and it even says the wife of Uriah, like, hey, David had Solomon, And so these women are mentioned. I'm trying to think who the other one is. Do you recall offhand? It was Rahab. There's one more in there. We could look it up, but it'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, I think what Matthew's signaling is, I'm going to tell you a story about Mary becoming pregnant through the agency of the Holy Spirit. And Joseph was not the father. Before you freak out, realize that in this holy genealogy of David, we've got 4 other women that are directly descended from David that also might have been looked at by the culture as somehow tainted or immoral or unholy, and it all has to do with sex. Now, I'm not saying Matthew didn't believe in, quote, the virgin birth. The author of Matthew probably did believe that. But what I'm saying is, if you strip it to the historical, it's kind of interesting to think about. He might be signaling, don't be too quick to judge Mary, because maybe God has purposes that are beyond your ken. Okay, that's about all we know. We have the brothers. I would assume they're children of Joseph because they do get married. Matthew is not at all a perpetual virgin guy. He says after Jesus' birth, Joseph did not sleep with Mary until she brought forth her firstborn son. That's at the end of chapter 1. So this is normal Jewish marriage,
Right.
That's not my child, but once that child is born, I will adopt that child, and then I will take my wife. And apparently there are at least 4 boys and 2 girls, and we even think maybe 3 girls because church tradition has traditions of another girl named Mary, and the Salome, we think, and we're not sure of necessarily the others, but let's say 2 for sure. Very possible. So that's where we kind of leave it. In the Jesus Dynasty, I offer some other possibilities that I'm not going to go into today. I'm not as convinced of them, but there's a chance that if Joseph died early and he had no children, that his brother Clopas would, and we do know his name of his brother was Clopas, he might have married Mary because that was required in Jewish law and raised children in the name of his brother. I suggest that again as a possibility, but that gets off into like the brothers, and we're talking about Jesus here, so I want to stay with that. So then I simply asked Jacob, is there a name out there? You know,
Right.
like we've built up the case, is there a name out there? And remember, I'm not suggesting I know anything about the circumstances.
Right.
You can imagine all kinds of things. I have a blog post called Why Believe the Slanderers? If a woman comes up pregnant in a little village like Nazareth, the slanderers are going to say, oh, she did this and she did that and she was supposed to marry Joseph. Okay, that seems to be what happened. But do we know the circumstances of her pregnancy? I mean, when Rachel is asked, will you go with Jacob? Her parents ask her, Isaac and Rebekah, do you want to go with this man? There is within Judaism the ability of a woman to say, no, that's not who I want to marry. Now, normally marriages are arranged, and it's even true in certain more patriarchal societies today, even not just Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, but India and other places, as you know, where marriages are arranged. It's just, the way things are.
Right.
So we shouldn't imagine, oh, Mary was fooling around or she's some immoral kind of person. What if there was a local Jewish person that she really considered to be her chosen one, her soulmate or whatever? And I'm just guessing, I have no idea. And what if the parents said, no, he has no prospects. You can't marry him. This is kind of like movie stuff. If I was doing a movie, I would have her say, well, we're already married in God's eyes. Something like that. What do you mean? What do you mean you're married in God's eyes? Well, we pledged did you know in Judaism, if you pledge yourself to a woman and she pledges herself to you, that is a marriage. You don't, even in America, I was told Abraham Lincoln, that'd be 1830s, he didn't have a marriage license. You didn't have marriage licenses. You wrote it in the front of the Bible. And the preacher that did it would sign and go, yeah, So
wow.
It's possible that Mary has something in her heart. Now, again, I could be accused in this interview of making a movie rather than an academic interview, but let me just say, I don't know. I have no idea. She doesn't come across to me as some sort of irresponsible person. And she's certainly highly favored and regarded by the Jesus movement and the followers. He's, as the mother of Jesus.
Right.
So I want to believe the best of her. So this blog post, I think it's called Why Not Believe the Best? And I just talk about that. I think I put some of that in the book. And then I asked, well, do we have a name? And that's where the Roman soldier thing comes in. But the way it comes in is kind of odd. It's in a 3rd century text. I've actually got it here. And it's important enough, I think, to read.
This is coming from, again, Celsus and Origen.
Yeah, Celsus and Origen, and we don't have Celsus. Celsus is a philosopher of the time. And here's what he writes. He's read Matthew and Luke, and he's a skeptic. He's not a Christian. He says, let us imagine what a Jew, let alone a philosopher, might put to Jesus. So he's saying, let's see what a philosopher might ask Jesus, or a Jew, not a Christian. Is it not true, good sir, that you fabricated the story of your birth from a virgin to quiet rumors about the true and unsavory circumstances of your origins? So here Celsus is being very slanderous. And he's in effect imagining somebody asking Jesus, why did you make up this crazy story? Is it not the case that far from being born in royal David's city of Bethlehem, you were born in a poor country town of a woman who earned her living by spinning? So he has this tradition that she's a cloth maker. The other tradition, she's a hairdresser.
Hmm.
Is it not the case that when her deceit was discovered, that she was pregnant by a Roman soldier named Pantera, she was driven away by her husband, the carpenter, and convicted of adultery? Indeed, is it not so that in her disgrace, wandering from home, she gave birth to a male child in silence and humiliation? Now, to me, that text is totally wrong, totally incorrect. It's a very skeptical, sarcastic, pagan writer saying, come on now, we know, we've heard the rumors about your mother. So there's no question that, and notice he says, imagine a Jew. He's trying to turn the Jews against the Christians. Like, the Jews are saying that his father was Pantera, and I think he was a Roman soldier. So for this to go for 100+ years on the rumor level, and it gets to him, shows that it's out there. People are saying, hey, I heard his name was Pantera. But the Roman soldier part is what Celsus added. You got to remember that.
Right.
And then people put it all together and they go, oh, if his father was Pantera, is that Roman soldier? And then they go to Germany and find the tombstone. Okay. I don't take that direction. What I would say is, does the name Pantera appear anywhere else earlier associated with Jesus? And it turns out that we have several rabbinic texts, and these are not the later Talmudic texts. Okay, this is important. These are texts that are in the Tosefta, which are, you've got the Mishnah, the Tosefta, the Talmuds. And they're set in Sepphoris. Now, Sepphoris is the big city, Herod's capital, Herod Antipas's capital, just north of Nazareth.
Right.
So it's interesting that they're even set in Sepphoris. A couple of the stories mention James. We think maybe the brother of Jesus. We're not sure. James of Shechin, he's called. And then they talk about Yeshua bar Pantera, Jesus, son of Pantera. And they're not talking about anything bad. Like, oh yeah, wasn't he, a mamzer or something like that. They're just saying, I heard that Yeshua ben Pantera once said this, and they're actually quoting him on some things he taught that we don't have in the Gospels. Very interesting quotes. I put them in my book. They're actually quoting him on some halakhic rulings. Halakhic rulings are when Jewish rabbis make judgments on points of law. And they're quoting Yeshua ben Pantera. They don't necessarily like the guy, but they're saying they kind of think it's wise. I'll give you one of them because it's sort of entertaining. The question is, if you're an observant Jew and you need to go to the toilet, but you're praying and you have all of your phylacteries on and your seat, and you've seen the Jews, you wrap your arm and wrap your head, and suddenly you got to go pee, let's say. You should have done it before. Now, do you need to take that stuff off and go pee and then go redo it all over again and start over? It's a discussion. And Jesus basically says something along the lines of that it's similar to Mark 7 about the latrine and eating unclean food. He basically says the kind of defilement that you would get if you did go and say you put your phylacteries up on a shelf and then you went to the bathroom, restroom, relieved yourself, and then came back. It's more like sort of like what goes to the toilet doesn't really matter. And there's several variations of this, because there's also a question of, if somebody got money from a harlot, would it be okay to use it and give it to God because it came from a bad source? And he says something similar there. So those are in the book. You can read them. My point is that they mention him in passing as Jesus, son of Pantera. And then there's an ossuary, a bone box in Jerusalem that was discovered north of Jerusalem, where somebody named Pantera, a Jew, is named, and he's the son of Simon, I think. I forget exactly. But the point is, it's a name in Jerusalem. It is known. And then a couple of the church fathers tell us that it's a name in the family of Joseph, and other sources say it's a name in the family of Mary. Now, these are Christians who believe in the virgin birth, and they've heard Jesus called son of Pantera, and they're being asked. And they go like, yeah, that was a family name. I think the main idea is it came from Joseph's family, that there's maybe one of his brothers or ancestors or whatever was called Pantera. Not that it's Jesus' father, but they're just saying, what's the big deal that he's coming from a family that could generally be known as the Pantera family? That's actually their defense of it, which is a little odd, rather than getting all upset and saying, oh, that name's horrible and no way could he have that name. So the name is out there. And then the question would be, well, then we can't probably go any further, because Jewish sources pretty early, long before Celsus or Celsus, know him by this name. Maybe that's some memory of who his biological father was.
So, I remember in the book you were saying that Pantera probably was a Jew, and that I guess from that, my question would be, under these circumstances, and I am aware Celsus is later and that earlier, and I was already familiar that with the fact that earlier Jewish sources did mention Pantera under a different context too. They didn't claim he was a Roman soldier. Did Celsus, or Celsus as some pronounce his name, did he confuse the terminology, the name Pantera, with one of the Roman soldiers that was probably called that, and that's how he conjured up that story? Is that possible?
No, I think probably by the time he's telling the story, it sounds like he's getting told that from his Jewish contacts that are against Jesus. And they're basically saying he's son of a guy named Pantera, and that guy was a Roman soldier. But that's not in our early sources.
Right. So that's a deliberate confusion.
That's a deliberate. What I would put it, the way I would put it together, and again, here we don't know. We just don't know. I don't even know if his father was named Pantera, but let's say it was.
Right.
You got to ask what happens in 4 BC. In 4 BC, I call it the year of the three messiahs. 3 different messianic figures arise: Judas the Galilean, Simon of Perea, and a guy who's named the Shepherd King, like David. And they all crop up after the death of Herod in March. So Herod dies in March of 4 BC, and there's a vacuum, and Augustus, the emperor, is going to decide how to divide it up, because he was over the whole land, and Herod had several wills, and it was very complicated, and Herod has a number of sons, and they're all rivals, and each of them wants certain territory and so forth.
Right.
So during that vacuum period of the summer, Josephus, the Jewish historian, recounts this in great detail. You can read it in Jewish War. He says that huge crowds came together at Pentecost in the summer, and there were riots and all kinds of things, and they were saying, we want a native king, and there were these messianic guys that came up. So what the Romans did is they sent down the legions from Syria. Some sources say 3 legions, some say 4, which is 6,000 men plus auxiliary troops. So maybe 10,000, 30, 40,000 troops coming from Syria, imagine. And they come down to the Galilee. They burn Sepphoris. They destroy Sepphoris. It's not the capital of Herod, hasn't come yet, Herod Antipas, because that's where Judas had centered his revolt. That's 4 miles from Nazareth. So again, this is almost Tabor's movie, but let's say there's a young boy of Mary's wider family named Pantera. Let's make him 17, 18 years old. And he was with Mary, and he's the father of this child, this unborn child, or the born child. But the parents have refused and gone ahead with the arranged marriage. And what if he got caught up in the revolt and impressed into the Roman army? So see, he wouldn't be a soldier at the time, but he could become a soldier later. And that's why I didn't discount. There's a tombstone in Germany, pretty near Frankfurt. It's the tombstone's in a museum now.
Right.
That in the Römer Halle Museum, but the actual place is on the Rhine River, just north where it empties into another river. And it was a Roman camp at the time. And this tombstone was discovered in 1859, as I recall. This is all in my book in great detail, but I don't always have it on the top of my head.
Yeah, I saw a picture of you measuring the tombstone.
Yeah. And so I decided to go there and check it out, people. And what it does say, his name is Tiberius Julius Abdes Pantera.
Mm-hmm.
He's of Sidon. So that got me enough interested. Sidon is just north of Galilee. It's only 30 or 40 miles away from Nazareth. And Jerusalem's like 90 to 100 miles away. And Jesus is recorded to go up to Sidon and preach and so forth. So the point is it's accessible. And Sidon's mentioned quite a bit in the New Testament, 4 or 5 times. So when he dies, he's 62. He served for 40 years, and he's an archer of the first cohort.
Mm-hmm.
And I speculated he's contemporary with Mary. The chronology works out.
Mm-hmm.
He's from that same area. Is it possible that this kid got abducted into the Roman army or joined the Roman army? Jews did join the Roman army. Right. And they were actually given privileges that they didn't have to swear allegiance to the gods and so forth. They were given certain. And sometimes people were just forced into the Roman army, but either way, I think it's possible. Or maybe he was not of the tribe of Judah. Maybe he was of what they call the Samaritan tribes, which would be the lost tribes of the north. You know, some of which lived in the Galilee, perhaps, because he's also called a Samaritan a couple of times. Now, when we hear Samaritan, we think of the Good Samaritan and all that, but
right.
What you're really saying, are you that renegade, bastardized group that the Assyrians brought in after they took away, the tribes? But the Samaritans say, no, we are what's left of the lost tribes. The Samaritans have a Torah. They have their own Torah, the Samaritan Pentateuch. So when you call Jesus a Samaritan, and in the Gospel of John, they say, his Jewish enemies say, we weren't born of fornication, you Samaritan. Are you basically saying your father was not of the tribe of Judah, or maybe something like that? So there, I just have to leave it.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during a live stream. Thank you.